Hi everyone and welcome to the internet. So what we're going to do in our biology lesson today is have a look at competition and interdependence. So we're going to have a look to see how these different organisms all link together within their ecosystem. Starts off though, 3 questions on the screen there that I'd like you to answer in your books based around our previous work. So I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to answer those in your books for me. Let's check those answers then. So question 1, biotic factors are the living factors. So that would be things like competition between different species or within a species. Second one, abiotic factors. These are the non-living factors, things like temperature. And our third one, we would measure light intensity using a light meter. So tick any you got right, add up your scores out of 3 and write that in your books for me. So next thing I'd like you to do then is thinking about this word competition. I want you to have a go at writing me a definition of what competition means in science before you start going on about football or other athletics and sporting things. This is competition in terms of biology. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to write down what is competition in your books. When we're thinking about competition in biology, we're looking at what our plants and animals are all actually competing against each other for. So what are they actually fighting it out over? Now, in order to survive, our plants and animals are going to need a number of materials from their surroundings. And what we find is that if we've got something that is in limited supply, then they've got to compete for those resources. And we may find that as a result of this competition occurring between those species for those limited resources, the weaker competitor may die or leave the area. So write down those 3 sentences in your book if you haven't already. I'm going to give you about another minute to get those written down. thinking about plants first of all, what I want you to do is, in your books, make me a bullet point list of all the resources that plants need to survive. So anything you think a plant needs to survive, in a bullet point list in your books for me. I'm going to give you just under a minute to get that done. So make sure you tick any of these you got right and add in anything that's missing. So in terms of what our plants are going to need, they will need light, water, carbon dioxide, minerals, and space. So add up your scores out of 5 and write that next to them. Obviously, any that you're missing, add those in to your books as well. So you've got the full list of things that our plants are going to need. I'll leave that up for about another 30 seconds. Let's do the same thing then for animals this time. So bullet point list of anything that animals need to survive. Again, I'll give you just under a minute to get that done. As always, tick it if you got it right, and if you've missed it, write it in. So what animals will need then? First of all, food. Secondly, water. Third is a breeding partner or mate. Next one is space. And then finally, shelter. So again, add it up, give yourself a score out of 5 in your books. One of the things we're going to be talking about during this lesson is this word population. So what I'd like you to do is write me a definition for population in your book. Then you can write down the sentence I've given you in the middle there, that competition has a direct effect on the population size. And then finally, see if you can explain how competition has this effect on population size. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to have a go at that. let's double check that we've got everything written down correctly. So population is the number of organisms in a given species in a certain area. So as long as you've got the number of organisms within a certain area, then you can give yourself a tick for that one. Now, as we've said, competition has a direct effect on the population size. And the reason that it has such an effect is because where we've got competition, then we create these pressures on organisms in an area that will then select certain ones that are more likely to survive. So if we think about two species competing for a single food source, then obviously there's only a limited amount of food available. So the one that's best adapted and therefore more likely to get the food, those organisms are going to survive and keep a higher population size, whereas the less well adapted ones, they're not going to get much food, they're going to start to die out. So some of the members of that population are going to starve and their population size will decrease. So we've got that direct effect on our population size of that competition between the species. And we can even see this happening within a species as well, that those different organisms of that one species will be competing for limited resources, and we're going to end up whittling away the weak ones. So make sure you've got those points written down. I'll just leave it up there for 1 more minute if you still need to write bits down. Now, as we've just said, the organisms that are best adapted will survive. So what we're talking about are adaptations, how an organism has been changed to make it better at surviving. So what I want you to do then is write down the top sentence, then have a go at the 3 bits underneath. Think of an animal, any animal, doesn't really matter to me. And then I want you to write down, first of all, the name of the animal. Then I want you to write down the key adaptations it has to help it survive. So probably pick an animal you know something about. And then, if you've finished all of that, have a go at explaining how each of those adaptations helps it to survive. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to have a go at this. Name of the animal, the adaptations it has to survive, and then how each adaptation helps it survive. Now, you've all picked different animals, so I'm not going to obviously try to suggest all possible animals and their adaptations because the video's not going to be that long. Instead, I've picked one, okay? We've got a polar bear on our screen, and what I've done is I've labelled on some of the adaptations, and particularly if you've picked a predator, then you're going to find some of these could well be in common with yours. So we'd be suggesting things like the claws that they've got in order to kill and hold prey. We might be talking about sharp teeth, again, for tearing flesh and being able to eat meat. We could be talking about animals that have got blubber, which acts as insulation for them. We could be talking about them having a thick fur if they live in these cold environments, again, for insulation. If they live in these cold areas, they're going to have small ears to reduce the surface area, and they've also got a large body to reduce the surface area. Because hopefully we remember when we go back to some of our earlier work, then a large surface area provides obviously a greater area for heat to be lost to the environment, and that's not good if you live in cold regions. So we've got smaller surface areas in order to actually make sure that we're not losing as much heat. We've also got things like the camouflage by matching the colour of the fur or their skin to their surroundings. And we could talk about things like the size of their feet, because animals with wide feet have them to stop them sinking into the snow or the sand. So hopefully on there we've got a few of those ideas for your particular animals. We've discussed the competition part of today's lesson. Now we need to move on to the interdependence side. When we use this word interdependence, what we're referring to is how different organisms depend on each other in a community. What we're actually talking about are different ecological relationships. So what we need to know then are the three main types of ecological relationship, and we're going to take each one in turn throughout the next part of this video. So what I want you to do is write down those three sentences in your books for me first of all. I'll leave this up here for just under a minute and a half. Get those points written down, and then we're going to go through those three types of ecological relationship. Our first ecological relationship is predation. So write down the sentence we've got on the board there. So predation then is the relationship between predators and prey. Now what you can see is at the bottom of your screen then I've given you one of these typical predator-prey graphs, and they do quite like these on the exams of days gone by. So what we've actually got there are two different lines. So the red coloured line is the hare, so that is the prey, and the blue line is the lynx, so the predator. What I want you to do once you've written down predation and the relationship between predators and prey is I want you to see if you could do a quick sketch of that graph and then label on what's happening at those different points. You can see I've put 4 lines, add the labels to those lines if you can. So I'm just going to give you about 2 minutes to get that bit sorted. Let's double check those labels on our graph then. So the first one we can see is the red line is much higher than the blue line. So what we actually have here is an increasing population of hares. Now hares are the prey, and therefore what we've got is a larger supply of food for the lynxes. So that first bit, the hares are going up because there's obviously plenty of them to breed, and therefore their population rises. That supplies a lot of food for the lynxes, which means if you look at the blue line just after that, it starts to increase. Because if we've got more prey, then the lynxes have more food, so more of their offspring will survive. Their population increases. As we continue along though, you can see that as the number of lynxes increase, then the number of hares starts to decrease. Because what we find is, obviously, the number of lynxes are eating more of the hares, making the population drop, which means we then get the corresponding drop in the lynx population. So you can see the blue line then starts to drop as well. Because if we reduce the amount of prey, we reduce the amount of food, so the predators will start to decrease. And then finally, what we see is that drop in the predator population means that there's less lynxes eating the hares, so the hares then start to go up again, and the cycle repeats. One of the key things to note about this whenever we're asked to describe one of these is obviously talk about the increases in each and so forth, but include the little sentence about there being a delay between the effect in one population and the effect in the other. So where we talk about the population of hares increasing leading to an increase in the population of lynxes, just add in that little bit to your sentence saying after a short time, or this happens after a short delay, because that's always going to be worth a mark here. So I'll leave this up just for another minute so you can get those points written down if you haven't already. The second ecological relationship we need to know is mutualism. So write down these points for me in your books. If something has a mutualistic or a mutualism relationship, then what we're going to see is both organisms benefit. So think about if something is mutually beneficial to you, then you're both benefiting from that arrangement. And what we can see in the pictures there I've given you are buffalo and oxpeckers. So the little birds you can see on there, those are the oxpeckers. And what happens in this relationship is the oxpeckers will land on the buffalo, as you can see, and they will then eat the parasites off the back of it. So the buffalo will benefit because the parasites are being eaten, and the oxpeckers obviously have their nice easy supply of food, and it's pretty safe because, let's be honest, not many wild cats are going to try to eat a bird off the back of a buffalo. So make sure you got those couple of points written in your books. I'll leave it up for about another 15 seconds. So our third and final ecological relationship is parasitism. Again, jot these points down in your book for me. Now, in parasitism, then only the parasite benefits. The host, the one that the parasite is living in or on, is going to suffer as a result of the parasite being there. And a really good example of this is the tapeworm. So you'll get a tapeworm if you do really dumb things like eat raw bacon, for example. Now, tapeworms we tend to find in undercooked pork. That's why you always cook things like bacon and sausages really thoroughly. Otherwise, tapeworm will get inside you, and you can see on the right hand side of your screen, that's the head of the tapeworm. So it's got the suckers and it's got hooks that are going to embed itself nicely in the wall of your intestine, which you can see in the picture on the left. Once it's embedded, it's then going to grow, because this thing is going to steal all of the nutrients that you take into your body. And you can see in the middle there, it grows long, meters in some cases, just flowing right the way through your intestines, stealing everything you are trying to take in. So it's benefiting, it's getting all those lovely nutrients from your food, and you're not. So you are going to suffer because it's going to steal all the nutrients from your diet. So that's our third interaction, parasitism. Just to finish off today then are 3 questions for you all to have a go at. So I'd suggest what you do is pause the video now so you've got a chance to really think about them and answer the questions properly, because I'm only going to leave these up for about 30 seconds today. So pause the video, have a go at these questions, and then obviously remember you can mark your work a bit later on. As always, you can find the answers to the plenary over on my website, scienceright.weebly.com. You'll also be able to find that under the Internet tab. Just select the week that we're in, and then you'll be able to find things like the lesson PowerPoints, the answers to the plenary, any additional work, and if there's any little experiments I thought you could do at home, then they're there too. So have a look and get using that.